this explanation has to do with the budget, just to go straight into this on the floor once we gather it.
Great, thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. I would start by acknowledging 3 things before we get into the details of the bill. Number 1, we took an extremely ambitious bill, S311, and combined it with another extremely ambitious bill, H687. And the product of what you're looking at are several amendments and lots of negotiation is something that I think really balances the original intent of Act 250, to have compact village settlements that were inclusive and to keep our working landscape and our conserved areas intact. 2, this is going to be really complicated and we really beg people's patience and grace. We are asking a lot of things. There are lots of different amendments. We really want to thank all of the staff. I don't see Ellen yet. I really wish I had a big flowers in her or something, but there may even be typos that we find or things that, you know, truly by 9 o'clock last night after I was here at bedtime, we still didn't catch in our final run through of the bill. But we are doing our best and we want to give people opportunities today and tomorrow to really, you know, make sure you understand what you're looking at. Finally, speaking of Ellen, if you ever go into Ellen's office, she has all of the comics from 7 days of all of the times we failed to do something to achieve this balance and actually manage to get real regulatory reform across the finish line. There was a comment out today, maybe it was out yesterday, of some smattering of us, whoever you decide looks like who, trying to pull a car out of the mechanic shop and finally get this done. And I don't think we've ever been this close. And this is the product of a lot of people in this room reading many drafts, sticking with us, and giving great input and remaining extremely patient on this bill. So that is the context in which we begin to discuss what you will hear a second reading of this bill today.
Around detail. So I'm going to help us. This is those sort of general remarks. You know, I think the helpful place that we all started was a year ago in S100 last year's house meeting. We asked the NRB to lead a stakeholder process that would develop recommendations for quote-unquote necessary updates to Act 250. That report went into Tech Naturals 308, and the starter of 311, the development bill, and it also was the starting point for House's 687. So they all started out in the same basic framework, which was let's build a stronger, more robust, and modernized Act 250 process. And then obviously, with an eye towards this big conversation in the session about how also to facilitate smart growth and budget. The 50-year-old goal in Act 250 we need to do better in terms of facilitating during a housing crisis. We know the housing crisis is complex. Act 250 plays some role in it. There's also cost of money, labor, for the workforce issues. There's income equity issues. There's resource issues in terms of possible materials. But for our part, what broken development in a way that we're comfortable to preserve the best from our values around living centers and urban development, keeping green spaces green. So really the bill envisions work not just for the coming year, but for the coming 6 years. And so that's one thing. There are things we'll talk about today that one to be unfolding to the process started. It's not that we throw the switch and all of a sudden it's the world. As around Tuesday said, there have been a lot of people working for months on the bill. In order to make the calendar work, Senate National had to vote out its report roughly 2 weeks ago today. And that meant that the bills would continue to move, would go to a finance vote, and then come to the calendar. Meanwhile, it meant that the larger committees will continue to take testimony and fine tune the language. I was saying during the courses before, for the most part, what we were doing last week was an iterative drafting process that everyone's familiar with. And we're up to draft 4.1 on just the amendment that puts the two committees together. Is sanding, sanding the furniture, not building open cabinets. It was like, how does this part fit with another? How do we make it work? How do we do this alignment? So here's the complicated thing that Senator alluded to in terms of we're asking for people to be patient and a little helpful on a process that's a little unusual. The report that we had wrote out 2 weeks ago is the addendum. It includes the reports then that came out of finance and appropriations.
At the end, so they're separate in there. That confused me for a second, but in succession, you'll see those.
All this information on the financials, the programs that drive those financials, like housing tax credits and programs, all that remains current. But what has changed is we go up to the first 70 sections, which address municipal and active and state planning in support of development and housing. That has been the subject of ongoing conversation. So today, because we have both this original report and then 2 reports from the other committees, we need to move through those to get to the second thing we can point out, which is this is the work in the last 2 weeks of the 2 committees to approve and come to a resolution on many issues related to land use planning and development, not the financials, which stay the same.
And not to harp on this because it was just a matter of process. We tried to give each committee as much time with concepts and language as we could. My committee was able to look at it and digest it for all of like 7 minutes this morning before Ellen asked who wanted to sign on to it. So again, there's a few pieces of language in here that were the product of going over the language with a fine-tooth comb until around 9 p.m. last night. And so I think Senator Clarkson pre-approved and gave her an indication of support, but I have a committee that likes to do things before they sign on. Our ultimate vote on this was 4-1-0, and our dissenting voice can certainly raise his, which indicates who that is on my committee, his concerns about the timing and process, and I certainly understand we're asking a lot of people.
Right, and to offer that. So on our committee, because the bill's no longer today, we're offering it to either the senators, all the senators signed on. And then we also took a committee position on it, and that was no surprise this year. So procedurally, once we're in, so people are confusing, all we have time to get a report that and get it longer. Walk through not the report in the calendar from 2 weeks ago, because we're going to be in essence replacing it with what's in the small version that's been handed out. So once we're in though, procedurally we need to cover all the bases. I'll speak at a high level and briefly walking us through our original report in order to advance us to the money pieces, which stay current. And then once we've done had those votes, we will get the amendment, which is really where all the latest work on actually resides in terms of the housing impacts and how we're planning. And so any other opening remarks? Otherwise, I thought we would just jump right in and explain this, because this is really where it was.
Yes, just glad we did a bill on timber theft and saving the trees because we killed a lot of them, and it's really fair to ask us like which document are you saying we're going to try to keep it as clear as possible.
They could have made that small.
So let me pause. It's a little unusual procedurally. It's not that we don't have. It's not as simple as just offering a substitute report. And again, why did that happen? It's because 2 weeks ago, we needed to move the bill out in order to get, to provide time for both finance and approach to do their own deep dive, because that's,
Yeah, I guess, I feel like I've lost the tool.
so, with that, I think, well, I'm gonna skip any sort of more preamble about what we're doing, but I'd say in essence, it's strengthening the board. Well, we have, well, I guess I would go to that for two, so I would rather have,
Okay, I thought that was the full report.
we're gonna stay high level.
Okay,
Because we
okay,
know
that's-
we
yeah, I was gonna say we have 10 minutes.
Well,
Okay.
so we're tag team wrestling. So that's how we read out. I'll just get started, since first, which one would be mine? So we're talking about if there's a statutory purpose, no, time there, it's very straightforward language. Section 2 amends, the Natural Resources Board, becomes the Land Use Review Board, because it's not just about looking at natural resources, it's about planning the wise use of land, and there's many other impacts beyond just, land use. You know, we've got traffic, schools, municipal capacity for development. Establishes, this is the so-called professionalization of the board section, where we say, we're asking the board to take on a lot of new work. To use the term of art we've been using throughout the process, which is location-based jurisdiction. So the long-term vision is that the state is labeled by region, by coloring the map. You're either a tier 1 area, a tier 2 area, or a tier 3 area. When you're in one of those areas, that helps to define whether or not Action 50 applies.
You will see that the blurb, the land use review board, starts on July 1st in here, but we changed that in subsequent amendments to January 31st of next year. So they can really start as a professionalized board in leading the process of issuing guidance and overseeing the tier land use mapping process.
So in key, we're getting to how do we create such a board? It's the nominating, there's a nominating board that a committee set up just as a judicial nominating. That was a useful structure. And then we end up with 2 members are helping do the appointing or recommending to the governor, put together a list. 2 from the administration, 2 from the office of the speaker, and 2 appointed by committees. In the 4th section, we direct that board to start approving regional plans and maps. So the first thing that's going to be happening out region by region, RPC by RPC, is that maps will be drawn that starts from define these tiers. So we have 1, 2, and 3. Those maps are going to be coming to the board. In 5, if we revise and update the powers and authorities of that professionalized board. In 6, we again more on the so-called professionalization of the board. There's authority to hire additional personnel. In 7, we get into some operating provisions relating to notice of applications and the handling of information, posting. For instance, when you're on a project, you post that your project actually be permits to apply for. In section 8, again, it's more of establishing a process at the new board. District commissions the work of district commissioners is brought in. And in section 9, we get to a process for the very first area that we're interested in defining, tier 1A. Those events that correspond in a very similar way to our current designated area. And the reason they're prioritized in the sequence of mapping and development is because that's where if you're in a one-year, once 1A is up, mapped and established, you won't be in those areas. Because it's going to take some time to do the mapping, we have interim regulations which follow in the bill that help us during the period of development.
Can you ask, you keep talking about mapping. What type, tell us a little bit about what you're gonna map and, or is this the wrong time to ask?
There's quite a bit of detail to come on maps, so I would just say that regional planning commissions already do mapping, work with the municipality on mapping for a variety of routes, as in how are places zoned, what kind of resources are there, where's their sewer and water, all the kinds of things you would want to have in hand in order to be planning on what sites are suitable for development and at what rate.
Because the Northeast Kingdom that I've represented for a long while has always been pretty rural. And not because we wanted it that way, nobody wanted to come. Well, over the years, things have changed in these wonderful other areas, and people are thinking, well, we ought to move to the kingdom. And there's plenty of space, but are we gonna get locked out so that we don't get development much anymore, or? I mean,
Yeah. I 100% hear Senator Starr, and the whole time there's been this effort to try, and I was just at the Rural Caucus this morning, to make sure we don't preserve any communities in amber, and to give them the beginnings of the process to decide where they do want to see village areas grow. So municipalities really have the reins once they issue that they get guidance on the tiers.
who's the Rural Caucus?
Who's the Rural Caucus?
I mean,
Oh, I mean,
I wasn't invited
Senator
to
Wright,
the.
Yeah, we're the two members.
So Bobby, can I just suggest that we use this time for the explanation?
Yes.
We'll have time at the end
Yes.
for questions and then on the floor, but it's not gonna help us if we break it up now with.
Right. So the end of this caucus of all, should we be
I'm thinking we'll go longer than one,
okay.
so because we had a late start, but let's keep going with the high level overview.
So I think I got us in this section 7, notice of application, hearing, and review. And mention that includes provisions around posting action. In 8, there's a ability for district commission to allow for a self-certification that a project is conditions of their permits. It's a facilitating step in terms of people under permits, and those more active. In section 9, we're getting active fees, where we go back to Q&A, so the prime development area, and the prime fee in there of $295. And then there's some transition sections here in 10 and beyond. So the land use review board, OLEM, gets more resources in order to help support the work of developing the master plan. In section 11, we make appointments to that board. In section 11A, we create an appeal study. So I'll slow down for 30 seconds on this one. There's been a big discussion about appeals of Act 250 permits should continue to be heard in front of, as they are currently, the Environmental Division Superior Court, or be returned to the Natural Resources Board where they once lived for roughly 26 years. That was a contentious issue, frankly. We're not anticipating this fully professionalized and rebuilt board being capable of hearing appeals for at least 2 years. There's no reason to make a decision now about what the best place for those appeals will be. So in order to facilitate development of what people already know and understand, we stick with appeals going to environmental division Superior Court. And we create a study committee that says, let's look at what might be the most effective place to house those by 2027 and beyond.
Right, I just want to say it's a whether or not we should study, not a how to do it study. So it doesn't sort of put the finger on the scale for that already being the feature. It's a question.
And honestly, that was a major bone of contention. We solved it. We don't need to make that decision right now. It would be premature anyway. Section 12, these are forest lots, something we've heard about for years. Like one of the things we're trying to do, we know that habitat is important. Particularly in the era of climate change, we've never had active, it's had no capacity to address forest blocks. A fragmented forest is less functional in the real world than one that has been kept in larger blocks. So it doesn't say no development, it just says we should be aware of what those impacts might be. So we need to define them. In 13, this related definition, habitat. Anyways, features move around after we have factors. In section 14, there's a rulemaking. How are we actually going to implement the road rule? We go through a rulemaking process, which, as you know, allows a great level of stakeholder input. And that rulemaking process will take place in 2 years. In section 15, we get the resource mapping. Again, it's looking at what natural resources are out there. As we start to build maps, let's be aware of the natural resources that we are, that we just need to be aware of, and because if there is development there, it will have an impact. In 16, we get to wood products manufacturers, and there is people that we aware when you develop on climatic soils, there's an option. Try to avoid climatic soils. But if you end up with a project that is developed on them, you then conserve an equal amount of land, one ratio. Then we get to 17, accessory on-farm businesses. So we have it's been an awkward landscape for accessory on-farm businesses in terms of they are subject both to municipal and Act 250 regulations. Farms themselves have Act 250 exemption, right? But now if you start having a business operate on your farm, are you still a farm? What rules should apply? This clarifies that a on-farm business may bring in the produce, for instance, from another Vermont farm and sell that produce at that farm. So it's an effort to help small farmers come together in order to provide better markets for themselves. In 18, we get into it. This is a municipal description that relates to the on-farm exemption. 19 brings us back to the road rule and the road rule itself in terms of how it will be applied. There's the rulemaking itself is in 20, and then in 21, that's why I do in the full-fledged report and off the center line.
Thank you. So I'm not going to necessarily go through this section by section. I'll save that for the full report. But I do want to introduce what the next 23 sections are about generally. This is where we actually get into the definition of what those 3 tiers are. And before I dive into that, I want to explain what the problem is that I feel like we're trying to solve, which I'm not sure, I guess we can say a little more about that. One is that we have places in Vermont that have robust zoning and infrastructure. And that process is somewhat duplicative of the Act 250 process. And so in order to streamline that process, we want to in places that have the capacity and the infrastructure, we want to make it easier to build in those places, and especially because of the duplication, eliminate the need for Act 250. So there's tier 1A areas, as we said, would be full exemptions from Act 250. And so those are places that have adopted zoning, land use regulations. They have public water and wastewater. And because it is a full exemption from Act 250, we want to make sure that there's no gaps, right? Like if we give up Act 250 jurisdiction, what do we potentially lose? Because there are state permits that would still be in force, but there may be parts of Act 250 for which there are no state permits. And that's why you will see that there's also a provision that places that apply for tier 1A status for an area, they must also have a plan for rare, threatened, and endangered species, because there's no otherwise like a state permit for that. So places can apply for tier 1A status. Another one of the problems that that this is trying to address is that we do have these critical natural resources. Where we're starting from with Act 250 right now is it's a threshold-based system. If you build too fast or too much, then that triggers Act 250. But for places that are critical natural resources, if you don't meet the threshold, and there is no zoning, you may not have Act 250 apply at all. And we may not want that for places that would be considered critical natural resources. So that would be a tier 3 area. And so I know there's a lot of concern about what goes into the process for determining that, about where those boundary lines get drawn. And so on both of those topics, I want to read from what it actually says. So the critical natural resources will be defined by rule, and then rules will be determined as to whether and how to protect these natural resources, and it lists some that need to be considered, which includes headwaters, habitat connectors, riparian areas, Class A waters, natural communities, and others. So it's leaving a lot of space open for the rulemaking process to determine what is the best way to regulate the development in areas that we would consider critical natural resources. It's not just anywhere that is rural. I want to make sure that that is clear. It is not, those are not synonymous things. They have to be critical natural resources. And then the other part in terms of the process, how do we determine where those boundary lines get drawn? That this is also very important. So first of all, there's a working group set up to determine that. And there are a lot of stakeholders in the working group that will provide input prior to the rulemaking. That includes the RPCs, environmental advocacy groups, scientists, forestry, VHCB, the chamber, VLCT, ski resorts. It's a long list. Department of Taxes, DEC, Fish and Wildlife, logging. Anyway, there's a long list of people that will be involved in that. And as if that were not enough. Well, I know that there are a lot of municipalities that are very concerned about this. And so, as a part of the process, they're also going to be soliciting participation from municipalities and landowners that they believe might host critical natural resources. So all the people that may be involved that might have critical natural resources on their property or in their town are specifically called out. We want them to be a part of the process. They need to be a part of the process in determining where those boundary lines are drawn. So that's tier 3. I'm going to jump back a little bit. We talked about tier 1A, and we've talked about tier 3. Tier 1B are they're more like village areas or village centers. These are places that will be determined by a mapping process from the regional planning commissions. They are places that have municipal water or sewer or sufficient soils to handle wastewater. They cannot include flood hazard areas or river corridors. They must have some bylaws. And the idea here is that they should be more or less automatically drawn. The RPCs will be putting forward what those maps look like. And then if you're in a 1B area, you can develop up to 49 units of housing without triggering Act 50. And then the remainder is tier 2, which is a place where status quo, or I guess I should say, where Act 50 will continue to apply as normal. Now, if any of these areas, well, I should say, if tier 1A areas are not like towing the line, I guess, if they are becoming lax in their regulation, then the land use review board can review their status and potentially revoke it if they are not acting in a sufficient way. But anyway, there's a regular plan for review there. And I also just want to put out that the vision for this, and it is called out, at least in the 1B section, the vision is that any single municipality could have any combination of these areas, right? It might not be accurate to say this is a 1A town or 1B town. There might be 1A areas, and there might be 1B areas. And so I anticipate a place like Montpelier might have all 4 flavors. Like we might have critical resources, tier 2, we might have places with water or sewer, but not both. And we might have places that do have both, right? So it is fair to think that any one municipality could be eligible for any combination of these areas. Then this section also gets into the interim exemptions. And so just to be clear about what is in there. Am I going too long? Is this okay? Should we check in?
Well,
I'll let us go.
I'm thinking probably it's a trade-off. The longer this goes, the less we'll have for the floor.
Yeah.
So if people are finding this helpful, we can go longer here. So why don't we try to stop in 10 minutes?
Okay, I can be real short. The remainder. So all of that starts, all of those new areas start in 2027. The remainder, or I should say the interim time, has some significant exemptions to meet the moment where we are in a housing crisis right now and we want to build housing. So high level, it extends the sunset that we passed last year, that removed the cap for priority housing projects in downtowns, neighborhood development areas and growth centers, plus a half a mile beyond those boundaries. So more space there. Then you can build up to 75 units of housing in new town centers, growth centers, and neighborhood development areas, 50 units within a quarter mile of a village center that has zoning, and places that we're calling urbanized areas within near a transit route that has 50,000 people. Now, I can explain more about that in the floor report. And then all housing is exempted in downtowns through 2028.
To say this is the section 31 is the piece that matters to the Economic Development Housing and General Affairs Committee. This is, our 311 was the only bill that originally had any exemptions. You can imagine, I've been saying we need housing now. When you combine all of these areas that will receive interim exemptions beginning in July, you have 240 village centers, you have 23 downtowns, you have lots of areas in between that will be able to have an up to 75 unit exemption. This is really about getting housing projects up and running now. And we appreciate the committee.
But we don't want to bury the lead, right?
Yeah.
If you're in a designated downtown, there's no limit on the number of units you can develop. If you're in a designated downtown or one of the designated areas and within a half mile of them, which makes them roughly 4 times the size, so much bigger footprint. You can do priority housing projects for them. So there's a huge opportunity to develop in designated centers and around the designated centers, housing at a scale.
So just to keep going, there's a few other exemptions which I'll get into in the floor report, but then sections 39 through 43 are a request of the Environmental Justice Advisory Council. But really, it just pushes back dates. They just need more time to accomplish their work, and so those sections do that, as well as give them more meetings per year, moving them up from 8 to 12. And that is, those are my sections.
Chairman Coleman, can you start with amicus briefs and give some updates on that?
I'm sorry, my committee, we didn't have time for It's probably
The next section, section 44, deals with amicus briefs. Some people say amicus. It means friend. Amicus juries, friendly court. Act 250 previously had material assisting parties. But this is a person who is not a party to a case, but who has an interest and who at least believes that they have something to offer the court's decision making. And it's up to the judge. The judge may grant amicus status or not. The next several sections have to do with the role of the regional planning commissions and the regional plan and mapping in dealing with what has been described and will be coming up again throughout this report, which has to do with the different tiers. And if you're going to have tiers where in some cases there is no Act 250 review at all, in others where there is especially stringent, you need to know what you're dealing with. You need to know what the land looks like, and so the different sections require of the regional planning commissions that they map their regions and identify particularly sensitive areas and areas in which municipalities have done an adequate job of environmental protection on their own, in which there can be, in some cases, a total Act 250 exemption. Section 46 deals with the duties of regional planning commissions. Section 47 adds climate resilience, mitigation, and adaptation to the purposes of the regional plan. Section 48 updates the process for adopting regional plans. Section 49 is, in my view, the most significant one. If this is sort of the rock star of this section. It updates the elements required to be included in the regional plan and future land use maps, including the new land use categories to be used in the Act 250 tier process. People wish to turn to section 49. It deletes and replaces much existing language, adds forest blocks, habitat connectors, recreation areas, and recreational trails as identified as in the definition of particularly sensitive areas. The plan is designed to encourage preservation of rare and irreplaceable natural areas, scenic and historical features and resources, and is designed to encourage protection and improvement of the quality of waters of the state, and to be used in the development, let me say this in particular, to be used in the development and furtherance of the Truckapole Basin plans established by the Secretary of Natural Resources. The language goes on that the plan and the mapping should include downtown or village centers, planned growth areas, and that a municipality has a duly adopted and approved plan and planning process that is confirmed in accordance with section 4350 of this title and has adopted bylaws and regulations in accordance with them and their citations. I would mention a little bit of history here. When Act 250 was written, its authors, Governor Dean Davis, Senator Art Gibb, they envisioned a plan much like this. The original idea of Act 250 was to have mapping, and it never happened. Act 200 was an attempt after the fact to take care of that gap, and again, what happened, but it got a lot of resistance, and the really effective mapping never took place. So this is in many ways fulfilling the promise of Act 250. Finally, section 50 calls for a regional planning commission study, just for further updating. And I would now turn big honor, yes.
At this point, I think we're gonna have to, we advertise at 1 PM start time. I appreciate this. This is information we don't have to give out on the floor necessarily. But at this point, we need to ring the bells. Have folks come in.
No, it's great.